spend a moment or two on the origin of that chaos?
Well, it's probably not going to matter over much for the purposes of this inquiry.
I'm not sure that we've I certainly haven't seen an email from Mr. Emery, Sir Harold, so if you've had one, possibly you could just send us an email address of Mr. Emery and we'll see what we should do about it, if anything.
I will do.
Thank you.
I will do. Yes, I will do.
I'm asked Sir Howard to put you this question. Sorry,
yeah, sorry. I just found the email that he sent me.
We'll be in touch with you separately about his email.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Who is it? Apparently we do have it.
So I'm told we have got it, so that's fine.
It's something I've overlooked. I can't see it. Oh yes, we do have it. It's under tab 18 on the penultimate page. Under the heading "A Note on the Insurrection."
Yes.
So we have it there, Mr. Pardon me, Sir Howard. Can I ask you this?
Give me that clip of your mind. Yeah. The one where I took it out, the one I gave you. A sheet of paper. No, here it is. Right, I'm set.
Yes, where Lord Justice Leveson is just reading the reference to it.
Yes, I've seen it now.
Thank you. May I ask you this further question, Sir Harold? And again, another call participant has asked me to put this, that at the end of the day, the articles allowed you to appeal to the independent national directors. And although your difficulties with Mr. Murdoch had lasted only about 6 months, you chose to resign when you could not have been dismissed without the agreement of the independent national directors. Why didn't you appeal to them?
Well, I did invoke the national directors when I was being harassed in the fall of 1981. I was in touch with Lord Robens and Lord Rolle and Dennis Hamilton, and also with Mr. Edward Pickering. Mr. Edward Pickering, Sir Edward Pickering, was the Murdoch appointee to the board. And so I asked him to come to my office, and I protested the pressures, and particularly the failure to be given the budget. And I said, I'm looking to you, as I'm looking to these other directors to whom I've spoken, to protect me from these pressures in honour of your duty as an independent director. And I'd known Pickering for a long time, and he looked at me and he said, you have to remember I worked for Lord Beaverbrook, who was a notorious, brilliant dictator of newspapers. And what Edward Pickering was saying to me, I am the 5th national director, don't look to me. So that was a total failure. Lord Rubens, Lord Rolle and Sidney Green, and somewhat lesser extent Lord Dacre, were vehemently in support. When the titles were removed by Rupert Murdoch, illegal, he said to me, we have Leviathan by the nose. And they were so furious they forced him to retract. So I then asked Lord Robens to come to my office. And I went into, this was in the dates in November, December. And I told him what was happening. He said, oh, that's his game, is it? He didn't even have a good word to say. He said, this is a lunatic asylum. I don't like the way Mr. Murdoch does business. Mind you, he'd been particularly infuriated by the question of removing the titles without the national directors. So it's not true to say I didn't appeal to national directors. Dennis Hamilton's response was just sit there and bide your time, and I Dennis, will sort it out and make sure that you get the the budgets and things that you were promised. And since Dennis Hamilton was such a figure, I was inclined to rely on it, but at the same time, Dennis had already been fired. He'd left the paper by then. So that was not... Lord Rubens, I had another meeting with Lord Rubens, who was speaking on behalf of the four. Forget Pickering, and the sixth one had not been appointed following the resignation of the journalist representative. And I had a famous meeting, famous to my mind, of Lord Rubens, where we discussed whether I should, with the backing of the independent directors, insist on staying as editor of the Times. And Rubens said, he's got nothing, no reason to fire you. In fact, he tried to do that. And Rod Rubens told me that Mr. Murdoch at an earlier meeting had asked them to approve my resignation. And they said to him, no, you can't do that. You have to ask Mr. Evans. And Rubens told me all this. I didn't know this had gone on, that secretly, of course, it was all part of the ploy. At the time, Mr. Murdoch was meeting journalists all over London, telling them he was going to fire me, etc., etc. I'd overspent the budget that didn't exist. I was a communist and all this kind. He told a group of Geoffrey Johnson Smith and Conservative MPs that I was a massive supporter of the SDP, which I wasn't. So the answer is that the real answer is that I, by this stage, was absolutely disgusted, dismayed, and demoralized by living in a vindictive, punitive atmosphere where every paperclip was challenged, freedom to operate within a budget. We got written instructions that I could not send a reporter to a fire without giving written authorization. The whole thing was a farce. The production systems were a farce because Rupert Murdoch had not succeeded in getting full access to the computer. I remember the occasion I'd written an editorial and I go upstairs to look at it in the page and I find it sticking to my feet because it was a paste-up system. It was chaos. It took a long time to get production right. So I thought, to be absolutely honest, it was attractive to think I should now leave the fight. I've got the backing of these four, and that's enough. I honestly didn't think I wanted to endure any more of the nitpicking, trying to produce a great newspaper in impossible circumstances, and that's why I resigned.
Okay. May I move on now, Sir Harold, to other issues, wider issues about the culture, practices and ethics of the press. And it might start off, please, with a piece you wrote, not sure exactly when, and that's part of my purpose in asking you this question. If you look at tab 16 of the bundle that has been prepared, you'll see a piece that you wrote, it must have been before 1981, called Privacy in Journalism, Striking the Balance. And it related, amongst other things, to the role of the press in the Lambton Jellicoe affair. Do you remember that?
What tab? Yes, I do. What tab is that?
Tab 16.
Okay, yeah.
So I think we're in the 1970s here, but I'm afraid I can't remember when the Lambton Jellicoe affair was.
Right. Okay. It's okay. I've got the article now.
I'm sure we will want to take time, Sir Harold, to read the set of principles which is in the penultimate column from the right. Do you see that?
Yeah.
These principles may be said to be equally apt now to when they were written.
The reporter should not do anything. Very hard to read this.
It is possible to read, but the
reporter should not do anything illegal, such as breaking, entering, stealing documents or other property, threatening people with physical violence, demanding when they menaces, impersonating a police officer, etc. When photographing people without their permission, nothing should be done which may subsequently be described in the published story. These methods which may not subsequently be described in the published story, these methods should be considered only when no other means are available, etc.
Yes.
There are a series of
Yes.
principles.
Yes, yes, I still believe those principles, and now would put them in rather gold plate.
And you would do that in view of the experience of the last perhaps 35 years since this piece was written, is that right?
It's indeed. I was great. I gave evidence in 1947 when I said similar things to the Royal Commission, and then I'm no longer editing when the Calcutt report came out, but I thought that the Calcutt report was pretty clear and should have been followed, and he did say this was the last chance saloon for the press to get its house in order.
I think that was Mr. Mellor. I think.
Okay. Perhaps the last chance saloon was a journalistic, colourful interpretation of what Calcutt was saying, but he did say this was the last time. Calcutt did say.
Yes, no. It wasn't a journalist. It was the Secretary of State who said that. The press are drinking the last chance saloon.
This sounds like an editorial argument. Then show me your sources and I'll show you mine. Anyway, I thought Calcutt on privacy was extremely good, as I thought the 1947 Royal Commission was really sure. And the reason my information is, and now we may have a superior witness in court with us today, my information was that Calcutt wanted to act after the excrescence that had occurred after his publication, and he was told or concluded that it would upset some of the political leaders too much, and so the opportunity to follow on Calcutt with a reasonable law of privacy was lost. And then, of course, since then we've had all the appalling conduct that your inquiry is focused on.
Yes, I think there were two bits of Calcutt. Calcutt 1, which allowed a period of time, and Calcutt 2, where he said actually this is not worked, therefore there ought to be all these other steps taken, and then the government decided that the Press Complaints Commission could carry on. And you may not have appreciated that I have made the point several times during the course of this inquiry that I am very concerned that there shouldn't be simply a report that sits on a shelf in a professor of journalism's study, that actually we try and make some difference if we're going to change anything that has an effect.
In my view, my lord, that is actually the heart of the matter of this inquiry, because it's the relationship between the politicians and the press, which in this particular case, the politicians, scared of the press, scared of having some kind of penalty, wouldn't do what they should have done, which was to introduce a debate of high order on the consequences. So I'm absolutely 100% with you on that, and I think a number of the senior journalists would be. It's really... I'm a critic of the press, I'm a critic of incompetent government. I'm a supporter of free opinion, free speech, but there is a limit. And now we have the European Articles 8 and Article 10 and the European Commission Court. We have actually standards we could observe. But it needs enactment. We could come to the question, well, how do you enforce, how do you make the press behave better in a free society? And I think I have some thoughts on that, which I'm quite happy to expose.
I was going to ask you that question, but I was going to ask you an earlier question before we got to it. Perhaps, Howard,
Yes.
you've been in America now for some time, but no doubt you've been watching the press in the United Kingdom over the last 30 years nonetheless, is that right?
Yes.
We had one historical perspective from Mr. Paul Dacre, as you know, editor-in-chief of the Mail titles, when he came to one of our seminars in October and said that, in fact, the standards of the British press have improved over the last 20 years, and in his own words, he said it would be churlish to deny that. I wonder whether you could assist us with your perspective. Would you agree with Mr. Dacre or not?
Well, Mr. Dacre deserves a compliment from me for the bravery exhibited in challenging the Lawrence killing. I thought that was a superb piece of journalism. On the improvement of the British press, if you measure it by quantity and the amount of newsprint now consumed, you could say there's been a gross tonnage appreciation. And in terms of quality, some of the writing, I think that British journalism in its writing and its design and expression is superior to American journalism. By and large, I mean, having lived with both, some of the general standard in American press is much higher so far as accuracy, checking, and freedom of expression. And there are tabloids like Mr. Murdoch's Post in New York, which don't go for that, which go for, and then there's the trashy supermarket magazines. So it's fair to say you can have a fair comparison between the American and British press, and the British press doesn't look too bad, but it's the excesses of the tabloids and the hysteria, which is really where I part company with Mr. Dacre. The persecution of individuals for no public good whatsoever. I think that is such a significant decline in the standards of the press. It's gone far beyond what it went in the Lambton Jellicoe case with having a photographer behind a prostitute's mirror. It's now got entrapment, bribery, hacking, blagging. We've got a situation in which newspapers are employing private detectives. We used to employ reporters, trained reporters whose job it was to find the facts. And the idea that the press has now come fringing the criminal underworld, I just think I'm totally appalled by what I see. So I have to part company with Mr. Dacre in that regard, while paying tribute to the general standards, the quality papers in Britain, the Guardian, the Telegraph, and the Times still remain pretty good, and so on. And some of the things that the tabloids do are very, very good. But there needs to be some external restraints to stop this dissolution of civilized standards.
Okay, the external restraint, it may come back to the question you yourself posed 5 minutes ago. How do you get the press to behave better? It's all part of the same theme, isn't it? Could you develop that for us, please, Sir Harold?
Yes, I think it's very, in my view, it's very dangerous to bring a statute to bear on these matters. Because I explained in my life, editorship, I had great trouble with statutes and also with common law, which had been congealed for very different cases, usually to protect property. So in the thalidomide case, a great injustice lay for 10 years because of the misapplication of the civil law of contempt, and so on and so on, many instances of that. So I'm very, very, personally very leery of an attempt to write a law which can meet the subtlety and the changing circumstances and is adequate for those occasions when you have to consider doing something questionable for the sake of a greater public good. So this is the tricky area. I mean, I took a chance in the thalidomide and I was vindicated in the end, but I was pursued all the way to the House of Lords and finally European Court of Human Rights. I think the best answer is to have a ombudsman or a senior a man of some intellectual and journalistic distinction as the chairman, with legal advice, with the power to issue a subpoena, with the power to punish, and holding the press to the very high standards. That I think is what should be done, rather than having a diviner statute, retain the flexibility of an ombudsman who's experienced in these things. You can go to him before. I'm not particularly keen on going to him before, but in some circumstances you could go and say, look, there are these gangsters who are doing this. Is it permissible in this case to bug their phone? And if I were the ombudsman, I might well say no. I might say that's a police matter. You should go to the police and tell them that. However, that's the kind of situation which nobody can predict. Nobody can predict the amazingly complex and difficult circumstances that may arise almost in a night for a newspaper editor. So the newspaper editor has to have judgment, he has to have principles, and he has to have the freedom within those constraints to do what he thinks is in the public interest, and then bear the consequences of making misjudgments. For instance, I've never been, there's a very good, interesting new defamation bill going through the Parliament at the moment, and it probably is a big improvement. It's not nice to see Britain become the tourist libel capital of the world, and I think super injunctions are an appalling abuse of power. It's not nice to see any of that, but it's much better if we could have a self-regulation system that works. What we've